Hey folks, this is Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. I just want to remind you about our website, fromtheshadowspodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We would appreciate it if you like and follow. Also, join our discussion group on Facebook called After the Shadows. We have a Twitter feed. Please follow us on Twitter. It can be found with @podcast_from. Follow us on Instagram at From the Shadows Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Go to the search bar at YouTube and put From the Shadows Podcast, and please subscribe to that channel. We are also on the Odyssey Radio Network, and we can be found there at odyssey1.com. We're still on the traditional podcatchers that everybody loves to listen to us on. We get a lot of feedback, so please rate the podcast and communicate with whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Google Podcasts. We're there, and we appreciate it when you leave comments for us. We also have a Patreon page. It can be found at www.patreon.com/From the Shadows. You can receive books, stickers, coffee mugs, and special content just for our Patreon subscribers. Check it out for yourself and see what packages that we have to offer. Well, that's all I have for you right now, folks, and thanks for being a part of the From the Shadows podcast family. So with that being said, let's get this episode started.
Howl, let's welcome the super producer back. We haven't had him on in a while. And you know what? I got to be honest, Howl, we haven't had the trouble we're having this morning with the last few we recorded without the super producer. What's that say?
I hear crickets. Crickets in the background.
I think it speaks for itself. I think, when you get professionals involved sometimes, what I'm thinking about is all the professionals that were sorting out Afghanistan and how well that sorts out this week. So sometimes professionals are overrated, maybe that's what it is. Sometimes professionals are overrated.
Oh boy, Jason, I'm glad you're here, but hey, apparently you're sort of like the professionals that ruined Afghanistan. So,
no, not necessarily. He brings, this is what happens, Shane. He brings a lot of equipment and a lot of training to the seat, to the table. But at the end of the day, we just need a couple dudes talking.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
There you go.
Know what I mean?
Well, okay. So we'll get to the point here then, because, listen, it almost was after last weekend. I had an episode where it might have been just you and Jason talking, just a couple of dudes talking.
You know what? And you know what happens a lot? Some people don't get famous till they die. So maybe you would have done us a favor, and it would have propelled us to the top. We would have had. I should have put a lot more thought into. How was it? This is what I want to know, because you've teased us all week about this ER story, but I don't know if it's you, the kids, the girlfriend, whatever's going. What happened? What? How come you were at the ER?
Well, okay, so last weekend was our family's big 3-day family reunion that we have at our campground on our farm. Okay. And we're talking, there's like 50, 60 people come. We got family members that come from Indiana and stay all weekend. And so, of course, big family reunion, especially a 3-day one where we're camping, there's a lot of food involved and just a lot of hanging out. And so Saturday night comes around, and man, I start feeling, I don't feel so hot. And what it feels like is I'm having a huge cramp in the middle of my chest. Okay. Now, I'm not a young dude. None of us are young dudes. Okay.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, I am. I'm speaking for all of us. We're not super young. We're not a super young guy. And my dad died of a heart attack at 49. So I've had this happen to me before, this cramp in the middle of my chest, but this lasted for about a half hour, and it's bad. There's 50 people in our camp in the like call it the party barn at the campground, and they're playing some game, and I'm kind of like trying to stretch out my chest to get this. I got to go outside. I go outside. I'm leaning on the Suburban hood, and I'm starting to sweat. My back's starting to hurt. And Christy, she's like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Well, I got a cousin who's an ER nurse from Indiana, and she comes and she's like, "Well, what's going on?" So I start describing the symptoms, and my mom starts freaking out a little bit, So she hands me a baby aspirin, says, "Take this," and they tell Christy, get him in the Suburban, get him to the hospital, get him to the ER. So it's like 10 o'clock at night. And it just so happens one of the headlights is out in the Suburban.
Well, sure. When you said put you in a Suburban, I thought, my gosh, that's the final nail in the coffin.
That's the final nail in the coffin. So I was just gonna drive myself. Okay, I was just going to drive myself because I'm like, she's not used to driving my car. There's a headlight out. We're going back roads. I'm having her taking me to Galleon Hospital because they have a cath lab. And I'm thinking, if I go to the other hospital, they're going to have to take me there anyways if something's going on. And because I don't know what's going on at this point. I had never had this chest pain like this. And so, we get in the Suburban, she's driving, but the campground is way back in the middle of a field in the woods. So when we drive, it's through a nice stone driveway through cornfield, but it's like an eighth of a mile, quarter of a mile. And she's not driving very fast. Okay. She's because it's bumpy. And I'm thinking, I'm not saying anything because my chest is hurting, but I'm kind of like, man.
There's no sense of urgency with her.
No sense of urgency.
Hey, the headlight out should only be high or low. She should be able to flip it over and get the other one to come on.
Well, right. she got on. Well, and it just so happened, and the real funny part is my stepdad. He's in the pickup truck behind us because he's got to go to Kroger to get some buns.
Yeah, because he should have just took you to the hospital on the way to the,
And he's got to get to Kroger before 11 o'clock. And I found out afterwards he was on the phone talking to my brother-in-law. I was like, "Hey, listen, if he's really having a heart attack, I think Christy's trying to make sure he has it." And he goes, he tells her the next morning, like, "Hey, remind me to call the ambulance next time and not jump in the car with you if I'm having just." And she's a good sport about it. But halfway down the lane, she pauses and she goes, "Hey, we didn't take our stuff to spend the night at home because we're going to the hospital across the county where we live." And she's like, "Maybe we should go back and get our stuff so we can just go from the hospital to the house." And I'm thinking, "Why I got to get there first." And so, we make it out the farm lane and, out where my parents live, there's woods on both sides. So she's going a little bit extra slow, trying to.
Did you just tell her, "Let me drive, honey"?
I wanted to, but then she's like, "Well, which way am I supposed to go?" And I'm thinking, it's a pretty easy way to go. This is how it's the back roads that we kind of almost go home. And she cuts a corner and we almost bottom out the Suburban, and it's just it's starting to become comical. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we turn down one road and she misses the turn for the road I wanted her to go down. And she almost comes to a stop and she goes, "Well, should I just back up?" And I'm like, no, just go to the next road. And so she goes to the next road, which takes her to the highway that goes into Galleon. Okay. Now I know that we can't go all the way in on this highway because they're doing road construction, because a good friend of the podcast, Todd, has told me, like, this road's closed. You're going to, you have to take a side road from a discussion earlier in the week. So I know as we get up there, we're going to have to get back off onto some side roads. And I said, well, up here, you're going to have to take a right. Well, she slows down at the next 3 roads, unsure of which road we're supposed to go. Like, this is the area she grew up in.
Did you tell her half mile or 1 mile? What do you mean she grew up in that area?
This is her home. This is her home school district, and she's like not sure.
Did she go to college?
She's an executive at UPS. What are you talking about?
That's the problem. That's the problem right there.
She's in logistics. She's in international law and logistics.
Yeah.
So,
hey, if she had got knocked up when she was 17, had 4 kids by the time she was 21, she'd know how to get them roads. She'd know how to drive on a gravel road because she'd be living on them.
She'd know where every Walmart was at, too.
She would have a sense of urgency. Hey, she'd have a sense of urgency because the ex and the kids would have beat it into her by now. She'd have been trying to get there to get rid of you. So her success is a disservice to survival.
Well, anyway, so the road we have to turn down is right where the road closed sign is. So now she's panicking because she's thinking we can't get down the road that I just told her we need to get down because the road. And I'm like, honey, it's just go up to the sign and we can go. So we get past this part, she's already slowed down for 3 roads. And it almost turned around because the road closed sign looked like it was keeping us from. So we're going in a side road into Galleon, and it goes from 55 to 35. And she slows down to 35, and I'm thinking, my chest is still hurting. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, come on, are we going to get there? I mean, I could see the hospital. Like, if we got pulled over at 11 o'clock at 10:30.
The cop would bring you there. The cop would bring you there.
You would take us there. So, long story short, we make it there, and she felt bad. She took her time a little bit, but she was trying to be safe. She didn't want to hit a deer. She wasn't comfortable with the Suburban. And I didn't really
Whoa. What goes? The Suburban is the flagship of the General Motors truck division. I mean, it doesn't get any more. I mean, Biden travels in a Suburban.
Well, I felt like it was the right vehicle for the job. It's better than being in a hearse. I can tell you that. And so we get in there, and it was obviously the right place to go. The people at the Galleon emergency room, super professional.
They give you a nitro and hooked you up right off the bat and said,
well, the worst thing was we got there and I had to go to the bathroom. I had to go to the bathroom. And so they coming out to get me immediately, and I'm in the bathroom, and I think they were a little bit irritated, like this guy's having a heart attack and he's going to the bathroom.
Wait, Elvis. Hey, I wouldn't let you. Elvis, that's where the king died. My granddaddy died on the toilet down in Memphis.
Uh-huh. So they get me wheeled in. They boom, they're taking blood. They got me hooked up to take my blood pressure. Boom, and I'm starting to feel a little bit better. But they establish, okay, we don't think you're having a heart attack. All right, and so we start to ease a little bit, and then I can, I'm starting to tease Christy a little bit about how slow she drove and stuff and kind of ease the tension a little bit. But what ended up happening is we had a great ER doctor. He comes in, he starts questioning, well, what were you doing tonight? I'm like, well, we had just eaten. Well, here he came to the conclusion, I knew I couldn't eat corn on the cob anymore. Okay. That's
why?
Because you know what?
What?
No, because you know what it does to me? It makes my chest cramp up. And so I have no idea. But so there was a dish that I had eaten that had a little bit of corn in it. And he explained to me then that what happens is it does not agree with my stomach or whatever, and the bottom of my esophagus is squeezing so tight to keep the acid from my stomach coming up into my esophagus that it feels like he goes, listen, if you feel that again and you didn't eat corn or whatever it is you're eating, he goes, then you're having a heart attack. Because he goes, it feels the exact same way. He goes, but this is what I think you had, some like acid reflux, and we got to get this fixed. He goes, because if you don't, then it's going to eat a hole through your esophagus and stomach and everything else. So long story short, I found out that my heart is actually really, really good. I don't have any problems with my heart, despite my family history, but I definitely can't eat corn anymore. It doesn't matter what form it comes in, because that was about the worst. I mean, that was about the worst pain I've had in a long time. And, but the next morning, of course, my stepdad, who's a very funny guy, he just really let Christy have it for driving so slow to the hospital. But, she's been a good sport about it. But like I said, everything's signed over to her, so she's got nothing to lose. She's got everything.
You're right. That's exactly right.
Everything to gain.
Well, you're a postman. You don't have that much to gain. I mean, let's be honest.
Unless I die on the route. So that was
that's right. She gets you back in uniform and puts you in the mail truck. Here, baby, you can do it. You can do it. Right?
Yeah. So it's kind of I don't know if it's disappointing, but it's definitely anticlimactic when you leave the place, leave the family reunion, thinking you're going to have a heart attack.
Go back. That's what I want to know. Did you go back?
Yes. Then we ended up driving back. Everybody was in bed. It was like after 1:00 when we got back. And then the next morning, of course, well, what happened to you? And so it's like, well, basically a bad case of indigestion.
She should have went to sleep, and then when she got up, you should have stayed in the camper. When she got up, he didn't make it. And it's like, what? He said, no, I'm sorry. No, I didn't. No sense of me sticking around.
Yeah, he's the funeral. I told my sister before we left for the hospital, because my sister was concerned, and she's not really ever concerned about me, but I mean, she was concerned. And I said, hey, look, if we got to have a funeral, this is a perfect time. Everybody's already in
Everybody's
town.
here. Yeah, that's right. You could have one of them, the ones where they put you in the ground within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody's
they
there.
don't have to embalm. They could just bury you out there. And then every time they have that reunion every year, they could go put some barbecue sauce on your dirt or something, and I don't know what to do, I don't know.
Hey, he'd have made the corn stalks grow a little taller.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, wouldn't that be ironic that I helped the corn grow and the corn put in it?
You replenished the earth.
So it was kind of embarrassing that you get rolled out of there thinking you got a heart attack. You almost come back feeling like, I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, I didn't have a heart attack. But I think everybody was glad that I made it. I don't know.
And the saddest
I thought
part
maybe
about
it was just an excuse to get away so you could go home and sleep at home instead of out there with everybody.
well, I listen, if I'd let her turn around in the driveway and get our stuff so we could have stayed at home, we might have. But then again, then if I would have really died and she turned around so I could get my contact case, it probably wouldn't have. I don't think that would have stood in the court of law. I don't know.
No,
well, I don't know. Depends on how well she gets along with the judge, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I when I was a cop, every once in a while I'd stop somebody that was speeding, and they'd say, I'm going to the hospital, and we'd always say, okay, well, we'll take you, and or they'll be like, well, I'm feeling better. Well, then you didn't have to go, right? Then you didn't have to go.
I'm feeling better.
Yeah, that cures them when you say, okay, get in my cop car and I'll take you, because they, not all the time, but most of the time, I'm trying to think. Everyone I ever had that said they were going to the hospital was lying. Now that I think about it,
So you never
So
had
I
to
hear a
deliver.
lot
You
of
never
people.
delivered a baby in the back of a cop car.
Well, I almost delivered my own, but that's another whole story there. But no, I never. You know what though? There was a half a dozen times when the gangbangers would drive up and dump the dude in the street out in the ER door. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
They dump them out in the driveway, and I got just thinking they had a sense of urgency, right, to get their homie to the hospital. So they just drive up and off. You know, my grandpa's brother got dumped out at the hospital like that when his first wife stabbed him.
Okay.
What?
Okay. So,
Well, I mean, it's not my. These guys are dead. I wish all the boys, well, with the exception of one, and maybe I can get him on the podcast. But my grandpa's youngest brother, I think he's 85. He's still alive, but the rest of the boys are all dead. And these guys were rough old, World War II Korea type guys, hard drinking, hard living cats, right? Well, most of them are either like me. I'm twice as big as my next youngest brother. They're either in our family, you're either great big or you're little. Okay, and the rumor is the little guys make up for it in other ways. Okay.
okay.
So, they're called, like John C. Holmes could have been a long lost brother or whatever. But anyway, so my grandpa tells me the story is this uncle, great uncle, my grandpa's little brother. He was a little bitty guy, but he was built where it counted. And of course he's a white guy, but he always married black girls, which was it's common today, but in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, that was a rarity, right?
Yeah.
So his wife came home early from work one day, and he was in bed with the neighbor. So she stabbed him a couple times. And she was going to let him lay there and die, but the more he bled, the more she felt sorry for him. So she went back over and she ran the neighbor gal out when she got there, right? So she had to run back over to the neighbor gal and say, help me get him in the car.
Okay.
So the wife and girlfriend get him in a car and they drive up to the hospital I was actually born in. And you'd have to see where it used to be, and just rolled up to the ER doors and dumped him out and sped off. And they came out and saved him. And the joke always with these guys get around, if it wasn't for that extra quart he had below the waist, he would have a normal guy would have bled to death. He had an extra quart.
Well,
It saved him.
It saved him. So,
well, I guess on that note, I'm glad I didn't have that trip to the hospital.
at least you wasn't stabbed, right?
At least I wasn't
At least you didn't
stabbed.
have the girlfriend and the ex-wife bringing you at the same time, or the wife bringing you at the same time.
Okay. Hey, listen. I got to look at it as a blessing that after hearing that story, that I didn't get stabbed.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.